And you would think that's a bump, but it's really not, because if we go to um, preview bottom cut, it'll show you the cut passes. So it's really just the blade moving over. It's kind of acknowledging that wing, and it's just slightly given a shift. How's it going? My name's Jose Magra, co-owner and operator at Chelu Surfboards here in San Clemente, California.
San Clemente is a peaceful community of Spanish architecture bumped up against 5 miles of coastline. Most remember it as the site of the Western White House, where former President Richard Nixon would go to escape the pressures of office. The heart and soul of San Clemente is more than its laid-back atmosphere. Here is a city with a rich tradition of surf energy. Whether it's famous names from California's early surfing history or hot new pros, you find it all right here.
We've been a glass shop in town for a little over 25 years, and just took over a local Aku shaping machine here in town as well a little over a year ago almost. And here with Nick from Aku Shaper, just going to kind of show a few things that we do with Aku Shaper and show you guys a few of our models that we have and kind of go from there. Sorry for the noise. We're in the cutting machine right now, so got someone in the background shaping. We have our own brand, which is Chelu Surfboards, but primarily we're white labeling boards for other brands. We do boards for Stewart, Rusty, Timmy Patterson, a few local shapers in San Clemente, and we did Lost for many years. So our standard of quality is pretty high for us, I would say. We definitely take initiative on setting our standards high with our employees and trying to just get the best product out there that we can. Let's throw this on real quick.
Yeah, that one on there now is just coming off the machine, yeah?
Just coming off. Yeah, I just finished this one up.
Yeah, sweet.
Cool. So yeah, this is one of our go-to fish models, kind of your more high performance-y retro mix fish, a little more pulled in tail, pretty not aggressive nose rocker, but still kind of closer to your shortboard nose rocker. So your entry point's still pretty playful, not catching your nose as much. Goes from just a nice flat concave in the nose to a little V, like a double concave under your feet in the back, to a little V out the back, and it kind of flattens out at the end of the tail. Yeah, kind of tried and true model. Surf this thing almost in a lot of different places over the world, and it works really good, especially for some of the people that have bought it.
Where do you start off with when you're putting a board model together?
I mean, rocker's super important. It all depends on kind of what the person's going for. There's various different rockers for different types of surf. Like if you're just surfing local beach breaks and nothing too crazy drops, you can kind of get away with a little less rocker. But if you're surfing pretty punchy waves and a little more aggressive surf, you do want to have a nice entry point and a nice exit point, because that's where a lot of your momentum comes from. Yeah, so we're at almost 3.25, or we're at 3 inches and 3/4. So you're at 3.75 almost on this one. But yeah, the entry point on a nose is super important, because If it's too flat, you're going to catch. You'd have to like kind of like wheelie down the nose a little bit, or wheelie down the face a little bit. So what that entry rocker does, it just kind of helps smoothen out the transition from when you're paddling to standing up. Hopefully don't catch your nose, and kind of helps keep that momentum going.
So how are you putting your rockers together though? You just kind of pull some stock down and
Yeah, I mean, I kind of go off of like if someone came in with a board that they really liked. You say, wow, Jose, this board's kind of magic. Can we kind of go off of this, but you can kind of do what you like to it? I'll take it. We got a rocker table here in the shop, so you can lay it in the rocker table and kind of take measurements every couple, every like 6 inches or so. We take measurements and kind of feel it out and see what type of rocker profile that board already has. And if it's something that really works for them, then we'll kind of play along and keep that same rocker so that they still are very like used to that same feel. But they could be like, hey, I'm kind of grabbing on my rail right here, or kind of catching when I go to do a bottom turn. Then you kind of start getting into the rail preference, rail profile, and start tuning that up too. Obviously, there's like your standard tail and nose rocker right up here. You can always just click on that and grab the nose rocker, and you can pull it up. And that's going to slowly start bringing up the nose. Like we just went from, 3.72, and just in a few clicks, you can already change it pretty quickly. And that's like kind of your standard nose adjustment. It's kind of bringing up the whole board. So I can go back to where it was, and then we can click on bottom. And then you have your guide points right here where, like, let's say the person just wants a little more flick in the nose, then you can kind of adjust that one guide point and click it up a couple clicks, and that will thin it out a little bit in that spot, but you're still adding rocker by doing that too, but you're only adding it in that one certain spot. Or here, you got your other guide points. You can take the control off and kind of play around with that. But at the same time as you're doing all that, you do need to justify the movements you're doing, because you don't want to create a bump in the bottom of your outline. So realistically, my adjustments, I'll either just come in and click on the nose rocker and just bump it up a little bit and kind of see how much it moved. You do want your center point to still have not going to say a crazy amount of surface space to touch, but you still want this part of the board in the water, because that's like kind of what's giving you the momentum and the speed. When there's not enough here touching, it kind of creates more drag and don't have as much surface area touching to, give you that speed that you need. You don't want to increase the rocker so dramatically to where the board's not even going to work.
Yeah.
That too much rocker will then create too much drag on the point where you are gliding and like surfing the board. So you do want to keep that somewhat at a solid base, like here, like especially once you're standing and your feet are on the board, your board does sink in a little bit. So, majority of the board is going to be like from this guide point, maybe even to like a foot from the tail. That's like what's really touching the water. So I'll just tweak the rocker here real quick so you guys can see what I think too much rocker for like this style board would be. And then it just kind of looks like a banana.
Well, and it goes back to that planing area that you were talking about too. Yeah.
Yeah, see, like there, it just kind of looks like it's just there's way too much rocker in it. Like the only point really touching the water is only going to be like this 1 foot of the board. So like all the water is catching underneath this part. The tail might not have enough push through the water. So we can go right back to that and just click undo. And you can see back in the bay kind of what that looks like. And it, to the eye, that looks a lot more pleasant than the rocker that it was before. You know, you have a nice smooth transition on the deck. Your rocker on the bottom looks nice and smooth. And then now it looks like from here, which is about, I don't know, 2 feet to 2.5 feet from the tail to about 2.5 feet from the nose, this is the spot where a lot of your board is touching the water, and you want that in the water. You know, that's like what's pushing you forward and creating the momentum that you want.
Well, and you also mentioned that we're looking for bumps, like in the rocker profile.
Yeah, so normally a bump, like obviously you can see here the small contours that we create, right? So like the deck or the bottom towards the nose is a little flatter. You have a little bit of a double concave right here, not crazy. And then you got that V out the bottom. So this is going to like kind of help you really drive through the water, push through, super playfulness. And when I say like a bump, so right here where the wings are, you can kind of see a small impression right here and here. And you would think that's a bump, but it's really not, because if we go to preview bottom cut, it'll show you the cut passes. So it's really just the blade moving over. It's kind of acknowledging that wing, and it's just slightly given a shift. You can go into your slices and come into where that wing is. You could create a slice right where that wing is, and maybe just, here, we can do that real quick. We'll just add a slice. Or before we do that, you want to get your measurement of where that slice is. So we'll go back to here.
And nine.
About 9.96. I normally start my wings at about 10. Bring in the small point a little less than a half inch back. So you can go add new slice. We're going to switch over. Put one at 10 inches, which is the very beginning of the wing. And then add a new one at 9.7-ish. It was like 9.69, 9.68. So those are your two slices for your wings now, right? So you could come in here and click on zoom box and just come up. Wrong click. So you can come up on the blue guide point and just give it a tap or two up. And that little bit of a shift will then slowly start taking away this little bit of a bump that's here. But if you start playing around too much with that, and I'll show you the consequence of playing around too much with that. I don't know why that guide point's all the way over there, but okay, here we go. So I'm just going to do something dramatic just so you can see the difference. And this is what is going to create a bump in your outline. So now you can visually see right here, there's two dramatic differences. here.
Yeah, through that
And
concave.
especially in this, yeah. So like, if you go too much, you can see here, there's some pretty dynamic contrast. So like, right where I did those clicks, I just created a divot in the board. So now this is a higher point than this, which you can get into like, you know, step ledge situations where like there are some boards that have like kind of like a step ledge like in a boat hole.
Uh-huh.
And that kind of creates a little less friction. So, I mean, to the naked eye, you might not see this, but right here is lower than this point right here. So it just, those few clicks created it a divot to go down. And then that's just going to add more headache in the shaping room and that kind of stuff, you know. So I am, before I forget, I'm just going to get rid of these because I don't really, you can do all that. I don't really play around too much with adjusting those highs and lows. Just because the software kind of almost does that for you in a sense. Sorry for the coughing so much. I just a little foam dust in the throat. But yeah, I don't really play around too dramatically with that.
Like, what are some problem things that people bring you?
It just depends, really. I mean, like, I cut a board for someone the other day, and it had a flat spot in the rail, like the curve wasn't kind of fluid. They tried adding a little bit of V on the bottom, and I feel like, did it from the wrong point. So then when you go to send it into the file to cut, the software is interpreting one thing, and I don't think it's necessarily what it should be. But that's just kind of user preference, you know, like some person might want it to come off from there and not from the rail. All right. So, I mean, adding a wing on a surfboard, it's more just to create a release point. Normally I like putting my wing like right behind the trailing edge of the fin. So depending on how big the board is, how small the board is, it plays a factor on where your fin placement is. On like a twin fin fish or like a 2+1 setup. When I say 2+1, it's like a twin fin with a small trailer in the middle. Fin placement's kind of crucial on that, and the release point of the wing kind of plays a part in how the board's going to perform. So I have my wing at about 10 inches, so that kind of gives you an idea of where I place my fins. And we'll just zoom in on this one little section. So obviously you go to add guide point, and you come in and you click your spot where you want to add it. My spot is obviously here at about 10 inches, and my other guide is at about a little less than a half inch. So I'll add a guide point here. This will kind of, you can play around with it and put the wing how you want it. And then kind of create the tuck on how sharp, how soft, how, a little bank wing, or you can do a pretty sharp wing. Obviously, once you get into like the machine side of things, you can slow the machine down. It can read where the wing is, and it'll slow it down for you, so you're not just chewing through the board. And yeah, I mean, little subtle changes go a long way. It doesn't need to be something too dramatic, because once you're in the shaping room, you can kind of adjust it how you need and how you see fit. And whatever adjustments you make, you just take measurements off that, and then you go back into your file and kind of adjust it to what you liked, you know? But yeah, so creating concaves on the bottom. I normally put my concaves like right kind of where the fins are and out the tail. The middle might have a little bit, but nothing too crazy. As you can see, like right dead center of the board, there's very little concave here, maybe a small single concave. And then up by the nose is pretty flat as well. And but back to where I normally put them, I like playing off of the rail, because in this section right here, from like the edge of your rail into like your stringer point, creating kind of like a vacuum for where the water is going to push through. So, you know, you can, with this guide point, you can kind of play around with that, flatten it out, draw it out, bring it more towards the center, bring it more towards the rail. I can kind of show you what that looks like in the bay. We can just pull this thing way up just so you can see what that did in relation to the concave now. So you can see how dramatic it is on the rail now, and especially right in this area. It created a pretty big dramatic difference. Which, yeah, like here you can see kind of how dramatic that really looks. So again, less is more. It doesn't need to be something too complex to kind of get the performance of what you're looking out of it. Yeah, so for me, when I look at this file, one, I think there's way too many slices. The more slices you put in, the more complex the file gets to the computer. So you're kind of adding more area to the computer to complicate itself more than what it really needs to. All right, so first glance, obviously the outline's pretty out of whack. I would say there's a few things that can be adjusted, but first thing to me is there's way too many slices on the file. So that creates more chances of error when it comes from the shaping software into the cutting software. And kind of like I was saying, less is more when it comes to slices. Normally I put a slice at about a foot, one in the middle, one about a foot from the nose, and one an inch from the nose, and one an inch from the tail. So this one is almost in the right spot. Yeah, kind of. So this slice, we could just move that one to a foot, that's kind of realistically where it should be. This slice, I would honestly ditch it. This slice, I would get rid of it as well. This one, I kind of get rid of it as well. This one, I will just make sure it's at a foot, 5'9" and a quarter. So 5. All right, so I mean, here on this board, you can kind of see the outlines a little funky. I would adjust this a little differently. Depending on where your center point is on the board, where you want the center of the board to be, that's where I kind of play with the outline, or, you know, this board's a 5'9", so we'll try to put the outline kind of as dead center as we can get it for right now. And then that's where you kind of play with these control points. And just by slightly moving this up and pulling it a little flatter and more straight out, you can kind of see that outline kind of cleaning up a bit, and it makes a dramatic difference. And then with this other guide point, you can kind of play around with the nose shape, draw it out more, pull it in, bump it out, create a little more volume there. So I mean, like off the eye, you can kind of see this outline clearing up a little bit, which is kind of what you want. You want a smooth, round transition here of curve. You don't want anything too dramatic, because that kind of takes away from the whole point of the shape. And when you kind of go into the rocker aspect of it, first thing that catches my eye is kind of the tail and the nose rocker. Just seems a little too flared out. You kind of want to keep something kind of playful. Anything between like 2 to maybe 2.5, you're kind of in that ballpark of playful tail rockers. And then in the nose, anywhere from like 4 inches to about 4.5. You know, we can keep this one at about 4.5, just so you can see the difference there from where we were to where we are now. Your deck's a lot flatter. Your curve points meet the water a little bit easier. Especially here on the nose on this one, the nose is a little too thin. You always kind of want to keep a little bit of foam in the nose. You know, I kind of stay around the 1/4 of an inch to 1/8 of an inch kind of area. And you can kind of see, like, the higher you go, the more foam fills in on the nose. You're creating a little more volume. Depending on that surfer, you can kind of play around with that. I do that from the top normally, and then on the bottom, when you do adjust those little movements, and as you see a guide point here, this guide point is actually creating a little more flick off the nose, or a little less flick off the nose. So that's where you can kind of play around with those guide points. Well, cool. I guess thank you, Nick, for taking the time and let me explain a few things that I kind of see here on my side of the things, on the operations side. And if anyone ever needs anything, our doors are open to the public. Chelu Surfboards, we're on Instagram. You can look us up there. We're on Google Business. We're located here in San Clemente, California, kind of the hub of surfing, I would say. And yeah.
Awesome.
That's
Yeah. Thanks, Jose. Yeah. Perfect.